Start with this, the threat to the homeland. Israeli intelligence says that the man who was the Michigan synagogue attacker was the brother of a Hezbollah commander in Lebanon. What does that mean for the rest of the country? Should Americans be worried that these types of terrorists or terrorist influence could be coming to their community?
Well, look, I've been focused on what our intel reports are saying, and this has been of concern for some time. We know that under the former Biden administration that there were actually known individuals on the terrorist watch list that were released into our home country. And so I think that it is very concerning. I think that as we proceed forward, especially with what's happening right now in Iran, it's something to definitely consider. But, I don't want to freak people out. All I'm going to say is that, these definitely seem to be organized, orchestrated. We saw reports flagged by the FBI that there was a notification system that came out of Iran. And so, proceed with caution and obviously report to authorities if you see something. But obviously, I think with what the president's strategy is on Iran, as soon as we stop with the strikes, there is going to be some talks with the new leadership in Iran. And I think that that might potentially have the ability to kind of suppress a lot of what you're seeing happening currently.
Yeah, you've warned about sleeper cells and terrorism potentially being in the U.S. for a very long time. You've recently said that the Coast Guard in your district intercepted a boat carrying Iranian and Russian nationals, obviously trying to enter the country illegally. You mentioned the Biden administration. According to DHS, there's tens of thousands of known terrorists who were let go into the country, don't know exactly who they are. So what are you hearing from your constituents about how they're feeling about this situation that we're seeing, not just in Michigan, but also in Florida?
Well, look, I think a lot of people, and this is obviously something that's, not just, I think, isolated to Pinellas County, but a lot of people were concerned with the amount of people that were coming in unvetted, unchecked, and I think that you're seeing that play out in real time. We do have an issue with individuals that have come here illegally or people that have been here, admitted in but not under, I think, correct vetting, that have been radicalized, and they are essentially wanting to destroy the West and their ideologies, and so obviously that's concerning. But again, in the United States, we have a lot of people, we're a big country, and so I think that that's where our intelligence agencies come through. And what's really disturbing about this entire thing right now is we know that these are threats. We know that there are people that are being, potentially targeted, especially elected officials, with threats coming in, and you have Democrats that are really wanting to hold up funding right now at DHS, and so they have chosen to make this political, and that's the unfortunate nature of this job, is you have people that are trying to capitalize on it right now.
One more question about national security and border security before we get to the Save America Act. The southern border has been secured by the president. It's remarkable to see that nobody is getting through. But a lot of the traffickers, human trafficking, drug trafficking, has now shifted to the northern border of Canada. And the government there has been, not very helpful in terms of preventing that from happening. The president has talked about this. That becomes an increasing problem given the threat scenario that we're seeing. So is there pressure from Congress at all on the Canadian government to do more to secure their southern border and our northern border?
I think that there's always going to be internal communications on how to fix that issue and fix that a constant, I think, threat. What I will say is that I think what they anticipate and what I have seen historically in the past is that depending on weather circumstances, that they basically grossly underestimate people's ability to really infiltrate the United States. And, a lot of these people that they do come across are either frozen in process, et cetera. But yeah, it's a concern. And I think that right now with the United States, a lot of countries, specifically our neighboring countries, have, I think wrongfully underestimated this administration. And then there's a lot happening behind the scenes that I can't really discuss on television that leads me to believe that they are definitely willing to play ball and that they don't want to try President Trump on these issues.
So you're saying that the Canadian government is willing to be a little more cooperative, even if forward-thinking and PR-wise, they're not exactly doing what we think they should on the forefront, right?
Yeah. Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
Great. One more question on this topic. You recently said that you were worried about lawmakers like Lindsey Graham, Senator Lindsey Graham, pressuring the president on Iran. You said that Graham should be the first to volunteer to serve in the Middle East. Do you still feel that way, given seems like he's on the same page as President Trump on a lot of these issues?
Well, I think that Senator Graham has been, for a number of years, very vocal about the United States, literally in his words, bombing other countries unapologetically. And I don't hold that same sentiment. I know that Senator Graham's a vet. I'm also a veteran. And I will say that President Trump's perspective, I think, on this is not going to be the outcome that Senator Graham wants, because I can tell you that based on what I'm hearing in conversations, not just, in briefing by the Secretary of State, but also too with the White House and the administration, that there is no long-term plan, rightfully so, to put boots on the ground in Iran, and they want to basically ensure that our home front, that our people and our bases, and as well as our service members, are not under direct threat by the regime anymore. We know that for years, for decades, that the Iranian government has been responsible for the deaths of thousands of Americans, and I think that you're seeing right now that President Trump was very serious about making sure that that threat doesn't exist, at least within his administration. So I will tell you that President Trump, against all opposition, definitely has a mind of his own, and Senator Graham does not speak for him.
Well, speaking of the Senate, you have threatened to block all legislation coming from the Senate if they do not pass the Safe America Act. Have you heard anything from the other side of the hill, as we like to say, about the progress on getting that piece of legislation passed for the sake of election integrity?
Yeah, so I put out my Luna spidey senses to my friendly reporters that are kind of gathering intel from other members of Congress, as well as in the House and the Senate. And what they're saying right now is that, Leader Thune has not been willing to do anything in regards to actually putting this standing filibuster on the floor and actually having that debate happen. And that's unacceptable. They're going to be doing a show vote this week. And so it's not just me. It's literally me plus, 30 to 40 other members of Congress in the House that are going to be voting against any rules and any legislation that the Senate sends over, rightfully so, because they can't deliver on the bare basics of what the American people want, Katie. Yet they can have dog shows and go on vacation 150 days out of 300, and that's unacceptable. I'm sick of it. This is a very real issue affecting our country, and we need to deliver.
Well, as you know, there's a lot of topics that Democrats and Republicans don't agree on, but voter ID and election integrity is one of them in overwhelming numbers. So, Representative Paulina Luna, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.